Yo, what's going on, guys, and welcome back. Today we are covering security clearances. Okay, so first things first, if you guys have no idea what a security clearance is, I'm going to cover it. But if you do like this content, if this does help you in any way, because this is a question I get all the time, go ahead and hit that like button, hit that sub button. It helps out tremendously. We're almost there. I'm trying to get to 5K before the end of the year. Hopefully we can do it. So let's go ahead and hop into it. First thing, what is a security clearance? A security clearance is for the military typically, but it is for all federal agencies, anything. If you work for the FBI, the CIA, you probably have a clearance. And basically what it is they do an investigation. This is high level. I'm going to cover it more, but they do an investigation, and then you go in and they decide, okay, you're trustworthy, and then they allow you to now see classified information. So there's a couple things here. Number one, in the military, it's extremely common. Almost everybody has some sort of clearance, whether it's a secret or a top or whatever. So almost everybody has a clearance. I will say I don't know about the Army, but the Air Force, I believe, requires a secret clearance to have any job. So everyone there has something. I will say this. This is a huge misunderstanding that military doesn't misunderstand because it's beat into our heads. But this, when just because you have a clearance does not mean you get to see information. Okay, keep that in mind because that is extremely misunderstood. You can't go to somebody and say, "Oh, it's classified. I have a secret clearance. I can see that. Let me see it." They won't give it to you. That's not how it works. You not only have to have the clearance, but you have to have the need to know. The reason being obvious, like you have to have a reason to want to see it, right? So that is the basic of what a security clearance is. Now, security clearance process requires, I got this off militarywallet.com. So you can see it's a lengthy investigation led by Defense Counterintelligence Security Agency, which is true. This is true. I've gone through multiple clearances. I've gone through multiple investigations. And I will tell you, because we're hackers on this channel, the clearance is slightly different. And what I mean by that is there's a couple of questions they're going to ask. Because of my skill set, I get asked a couple other questions. And they may ask everybody, but I wasn't asked it on some of my earlier clearances. So that's why I say maybe it changes for us. But usually you'll get questions and they're like, have you ever taken over another machine? Have you ever, done access information you shouldn't have on an information system that you shouldn't have been accessing, that type of thing. I get those questions on there now. And they do full investigations on this. So what are they looking for? That's the first thing I get. First question I get is, what are they looking for? Number one, they're not investigating you to see if you're a criminal. Okay, this is not a background check. They know if you're a criminal. They don't care. They're investigating, number one, are you trustworthy? Number two, can they trust you with secrets, right? Number two, do you have any red flags? And number three, do you tell the truth? And I know that sounds like trustworthy and tell the truth are the same, slightly. What I mean by that is, okay, they're going to ask you this investigation. It's a huge questionnaire. It's I don't know how many pages, right? You fill it all out. They're going to go through and they're going to validate everything you say. So depending on your level, so you can see there's 3 levels. There's top secret, secret, confidential. There's even more that I'm going to cover. But let's say you get a secret. That's a mid-level. You're not going to get access to a ton of information, even with the secret. But with the secret, they're going to give you this huge packet. You fill it all out. They're going to go, and you said, hey, your neighbor was Joe Schmo down the street from 1992 to 1996, right? They're going to go validate. They're going to not only check records, they're going to go find Joe Schmo from 1992, and they're going to ask him, hey, was this your neighbor? Was he a good guy? How is he? Da da da. And I'll tell you this. A lot of people say, like I've heard a lot of people say, well, this isn't a big deal. No, I'll pass no problem because nobody's going to I'm going to call those people and tell them, hey, they think of them more as a reference than a investigation. And I'll tell you that doesn't always work. And the reason being, this is just an example. I used to work with a guy. I'll never say a name on here. You know that. But I used to work with a guy that really didn't trust him with anything, and that was because he had so many red flags. He was hurting for money all the time. That's a huge red flag because people can buy information from you, right? He was hurting for money. He was doing this. He was doing that, and he put me as a reference, right? I'm not gonna lie to an investigator. Why? Because if I say, yeah, he's a trustworthy guy, he's a great dude, he's a freaking awesome, right? And then they find out he's not, guess who also is now under investigation? Me. So I do not lie on those. I will be 100% honest always. And so will a lot of other people because it is a federal investigation. It's not the same as a reference. You can get in trouble for lying on these. So that is why, just heads up, if you're not a trustworthy person, tell that. Be honest. What I mean by that is if you say, yeah, I got arrested for forging documents 2 years ago, whatever. Don't hide that because they'll see the lie and they'll automatically get you out of there. So that's the number one thing when you're getting investigated, 100% truth, 100% honesty. They're not evaluating if you've ever smoked weed when you were 19 or if you got a DUI when you're 20 or whatever. That they don't give a shit about that. They care about simply, are you telling us the truth? Now, here's another thing they don't tell you. If you have a security clearance or if you're getting a security clearance, they investigate, depending on which clearance you have, it's every 5 or 10 years, right? They investigate every 5 or 10 years, and they'll give you the same packet, and the same packet that you just had, you won't get your original, and you fill it out. If the answers change, you're a liar. Right? So you need to know. And the reason I say that is because some people, especially when they're younger, they get in the military and they get this clearance packet and they're scared to put, I tried drugs or whatever. Well, if you put, I've never tried drugs, and then 10 years later, they reinvestigate you and you put, I have tried drugs. Guess what? In the last 10 years, while you were in the military, you just said you tried drugs. So hopefully that makes sense to you guys. Now, that's just a little bit of the process, but we're going to talk about how you can get it as a civilian and the different levels. So you have confidential, secret, and TS. This will all depend on what you need it for. So I'll say that. The TS actually goes further than that. There's TS SCI. There's also TS SCI with the lie detector test. There's different levels, right? And I know a lot of you think, like if you were watching this channel and you've never thought about a clearance, never even heard of it. A lot of you probably think like, who cares? Like, I don't need a clearance, right? But I'll tell you, like, Amazon hires the crap ton of people with clearances. Google, all these people, because they work for the federal government too, or with the federal government. So anyone that works in a federal sector, meaning AWS, Azure, Microsoft, all these, Cisco, they all have positions with clearances, okay? And you can be civilian. So now, how do you get... Okay, so they do have right here SCI and stuff like that, compartment. So they do have those in there. So to get the clearance as a civilian, you have to be sponsored. What that means is, it doesn't mean that because I'm in the military, I can go walk up and say, hey, I want to sponsor you and give you a clearance. That's not how it works. You have to be sponsored by the company that's hiring you. So what that means is, let's say you're applying for a Amazon job, right? Amazon has to sponsor you and say, we want to hire this guy with a clearance. We need him to get this clearance. Then you can get the clearance, right? This sounds like it doesn't happen very often, but I have seen a lot of civilians that work in federal sectors with these clearances. So keep that in mind. This is something you can do. This is something that's been done. You just are going to be harder pressed to find a company that wants to pay and sponsor you. Because there's a lot of military members that already have these clearances. But I will tell you, the military numbers are not what they used to be. So this is starting to open up as an avenue for civilians. So here's the confidential, secret, top secret. Here we go. This is another big one right here. Two things. One, the process of getting clearance can be very intrusive. This is true. They will be talking to every family member, everybody, especially if it's a top secret. They're really going to dive into your life. They're going to watch you. What I mean by that is it's a constant monitoring. So if you get a DUI, right, you could lose your clearance, which means you could lose your job. So these are different levels of jobs. And what I mean by that is you're going to get the job, but you have to maintain that level of secrecy and trustworthiness. So you still have to be a good person forever. Avoid scams. Experts warn job seekers about recruiting, blah, 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 attorneys, other companies that promise to obtain security clearance for you or pre-approve you. You cannot be pre-approved. This process takes a long time. That is another thing to understand is this can take up to 2 years, if not longer, to finish these clearances. And I know a lot of people are like, well, yeah, probably more like 6 months, right? I've seen this take over 2 years, okay? And I've seen it in military members take years, okay? And those are people that already were cleared. So keep in mind, if there's anything in your packet that flags something, this can extend dramatically. It can take 6 months more or a year more to investigate it. But here's the big thing. Get your foot in the door. So starting in a non-classified job, put your time in, let your manager know that you're interested in moving in a classified position. This is a great way to do this. What I mean by that is, so you go to a job that has, so here, this is just an example in cybersecurity. I just did a quick on clearance jobs. These are jobs that are specifically for people with clearances. I went on clearance jobs and I typed in cybersecurity, and look, we've got 6,000 jobs right here alone. So this opens up a huge market of jobs, okay? So that's why you want to do this if this is the route you want to go. Now, with this, keep in mind that what he was saying is start with a non-classified job. That is a great suggestion. What he means by that is, let's say we click on this one. This is just the first one. So, okay, and so it's actually with the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. Go to their site and look for non-classified jobs. Get your foot in the door. Work there for a little bit, and then they're more likely to then sponsor you for this position if they don't want to sponsor you outright, which makes sense. That's a big risk for them to spend years or 6 months to 2 years doing this and actually putting in the time and the sponsorship and all that for you not to work out or for you to leave. The other reason that they're so hesitant to give these to civilians at times is because these companies are going to pay a lot of money to get this investigation done. When this happens, civilians start to realize that federal government pays way less than the private sector. Okay. The military knows that. Everybody knows that works in the federal government, but the civilians who think that it's like so cool to work for the CIA or the NSA or the FBI, right? I can promise you, I've worked with those people. I've worked with those agencies. They're making much less. And that's not a bad thing. They are really passionate about what they do. And that's awesome. And I've worked for some of these agencies, and it is a very, very fulfilling job. It's you really feel like you're changing things, right? But you're making less. What I mean, why I point that out is, number one, to give expectations. Number two is because that's why these companies are so hesitant to give these clearances, because there's so many young guys, young girls out there that take these jobs, go out there, say, oh, I got a clearance, I got this job, it's awesome. And they're like, okay, I'm making $60,000. That's great. And then guess what? 2 years later, they go, I'm only making $60,000. I can make $100,000 if I go over here, and they leave. That happens all the time in the federal government. That's a problem. Okay. So you have to understand that that's why they're hesitant, because they're going to spend all this upfront cost just to train you for you to probably just leave. And that's not what they want. Obviously, nobody wants that. But the federal government is not going to pay you more because they have a budget. Every company has a budget. The federal government's budget, the difference is they can't go, he's worth it a little bit more. They're not going to really pay you anymore. They have a specific budget. That's what you're going to get, especially if it's like I'm not even going to dive into the type of positions, but there's certain positions that the range is just, it is what it is. There's nothing you can do. So you can see, though, 6,000 jobs. I mean, who knows what city you live in? Let's say you live in, and you can tell almost all of them are by bases. But keep in mind, there's federal buildings, there's all kinds of stuff. So look at all these cities. Quantico, that's probably the FBI. Let's see, DC, that's going to be the majority of them, because there's Fort Meade right there. There's the NSAs right there. All of them are right there. But you can see there's so many jobs out there just waiting for people with clearances. You do not have to be in the military for these. but you do have to have the company that's hiring you sponsor you. What that means, again, just to recap, simple, that company has to then go out, say, we want to hire you, and they have to initiate your security clearance investigation. You cannot initiate it yourself. So if you guys have any questions on this, hop in the Discord. I'm happy to dive into it. I've had multiple levels of clearances, and I'm more than happy to talk about the differences in each one, how extensive some of these backgrounds can be, really whatever you guys need. So hop in the Discord. Let me know what you guys think. If you guys do have questions, I know this is there's going to be a lot of military members that don't like that I'm making this video, because this has kind of been the niche market for military. Like, hey, when I get out of the military, I can go right here because I have a clearance. But it also, there's so many good civilian cybersecurity professionals, and there's 6,000 jobs sitting right here just this week that need filled, right? So there's a need for it. It helps people out. Let's help each other out, right? So hopefully you guys like the video. Let me know if you guys do. Thanks. Have a good day.